The royal court brought Seris Ashborne to the Emberless Forge because dead fire was supposed to prove she was nothing. Not dangerous, not chosen, not worthy of fear, only cursed. She stood barefoot on the black stone floor beneath the throne hall of Veyrath, with iron cuffs around her wrists and a strip of ash silk tied across the old burn mark on her left palm. Above her, dragon banners hung from the vaulted ceiling, their gold threads dulled by years of smoke. Before her waited the forge no one had seen burn in 20 years. The Emberless Forge. It sat at the foot of the Dragon King's throne, carved from black mountain iron, cold as a grave, and wide enough to swallow a body. Its anvil had once forged royal names into the throne bond, binding each true king to the fire beneath the palace. Now its mouth was dark, its coals were gray. Its hammer hung above the anvil without chain or hand, frozen in the air like a punishment that had never fallen. The court had gathered to watch it remain silent. High Forge priestess Malvara Sorn stood beside the dead coals in robes the color of old silver. Her hair was braided with thin strips of black metal, and her eyes held the polished calm of someone who had already chosen the ending. "Seris Ashborne," she said, her voice carrying through the hall. "Daughter of the ash-blooded traitor line, marked by forbidden fire, you are accused of carrying a false ember near the royal throne." A murmur moved through the nobles. Seris kept her head lifted. That was the only dignity she could still afford. "I carried coal baskets," she said. "Nothing more." A lord near the front smiled. "Even coal rejects her." Soft laughter followed. Seris did not look at him. She had heard worse since childhood. Curse marked. Ash witch. Forge rat. Girl with dead fire in her veins. When noble children were frightened, their nurses told them Seris Ashborne would touch their shadows and turn them into soot. When servants wanted someone punished, they blamed the girl whose palm had burned black before she could speak. But the burn beneath the ash silk did not feel like a curse today. It throbbed, once, twice, as if something under the stone had begun to count her breaths. At the top of the dais, Dragon King Kaelor Veyr sat on the black gold throne with one hand curled over the armrest. He had not spoken since Seris was dragged in. He wore dark armor shaped like overlapping dragon scales, and his face was beautiful in the cold, dangerous way of a blade pulled clean from fire. His eyes were molten amber, but the light inside them looked strained, as if some inner flame had to fight to stay alive. Behind his throne, the great carved dragon wings of the royal seat remained dull. Unlit. That was the wound no one named aloud. A true Dragon King's throne was supposed to answer him. Kaelor's had not answered in years. Malvara turned toward him with practiced sorrow. "Your Majesty, the forge must test her. If the Emberless Forge remains cold beneath her touch, the court will know the ash curse has no royal fire. She can be banished before her corruption spreads." Seris felt the hall tighten around that word. Banished. Beyond Veyrath's walls waited the cinder wilds, where old forge smoke poisoned the rivers and failed dragon bones surfaced after storms. No one banished there was meant to return. Kaelor's gaze lowered to Seris's bound hands. For one brief moment, something changed in his expression. Not pity, recognition held behind suspicion. "Why is her palm covered?" he asked. Malvara's smile did not move. "The mark is unclean." "Then why hide it from the court?" The question fell like a hot coal into dry straw. Seris looked at him despite herself. The Dragon King's eyes met hers. The air between them tightened so sharply she forgot the cuffs at her wrists. He did not look at her like a man looking at a cursed woman. He looked as if he had heard a sound no one else could hear. Malvara stepped between them. "The mark will be revealed when the forge rejects her," she said. "That is the law." Kaelor leaned back against the dark throne, but his fingers tightened on the armrest. The metal groaned, once beneath his grip. "Proceed," he said. Two guards forced Seris forward. The forge waited. No heat came from it, no ember, no breath, only cold iron and old ash. Yet the closer Seris came, the more violently the mark beneath her silk covering burned. She remembered her mother's hands, rough from laundry water, wrapping that mark when Seris was small. "Never let them make you touch royal iron." "Why?" Seris had asked. Her mother had only kissed her hair and whispered, "Because some fires do not wake gently." A guard seized Seris's wrist. Kaelor rose halfway from the throne. The court noticed. So did my Ovada. Your Majesty? The priestess asked softly. The king did not answer. His eyes were fixed on Seris's covered hand. The guard tore away the ash silk. Gasps scattered through the hall. The mark on Seris's palm was not a simple burn. It was a circle of blackened lines shaped like a hammer, a flame, and a crown split down the middle. For years, everyone had called it a curse because curses were easier to explain than old designs no priest wanted remembered. Malvara's face went still, only for a heartbeat. Long enough, Seris saw it. So did Kaelor. Touch the forge, Malvara commanded. The guard slammed Seris's palm down on the black anvil. The world stopped. Nothing happened. For one breath. For two. Laughter began at the edge of the court, relieved and cruel. Then the hammer above the anvil fell. No hand held it. No chain guided it. It struck the dead forge with a sound that split the throne hall open. Blue-white sparks exploded from the anvil. Seris cried out, but the iron under her palm was no longer cold. It was waking. Heat poured through her skin, not burning, but recognizing, as if the forge had been waiting under ash with its teeth clenched shut for 20 years. Behind her, the Dragon King's throne screamed. Every noble turned. Molten letters began to burn across the black gold seat, carving themselves into the dragon wings behind Kaelor's shoulders. One letter, then another. Fire ran through the throne like blood returning to a body. Seris could not read the old forge script, but Kaelor could. His face drained of color. Malvara took one step back. The hammer rose again, struck again. More letters blazed across the throne, not naming Kaelor, not condemning Seris, but forging a name the court had buried beneath fear and ash. Seris Ashborne. The forge had written her name into the Dragon King's throne, and beneath the name, a second line began to burn. Bond unfinished. For one breath, no one in the throne hall moved. The molten words burned across the dragon wings behind King Kaelor, as if the throne itself had opened an old wound. Seris Ashborne. Bond unfinished. Seris stared at her own name until the letters blurred. Her palm remained pressed to the anvil, trapped beneath a heat that did not scorch her skin but reached deeper, into the place where fear had lived for so many years that it had almost become part of her bones. The forge knew her. That was impossible. The court had spent her entire life teaching her she was a stain left behind by a traitor line, a cursed woman fit only to carry coal and keep her head lowered. Names like hers were not written in royal fire. Names like hers were scraped from servant ledgers when nobles tired of remembering them. Yet there it was, burning behind the Dragon King. Kaelor stood fully now. The light from the throne painted one side of his face gold and the other black. His expression had not softened, but something inside it had cracked. Not weakness, recognition sharpened into danger. Remove her hand, Malvara said. The guards hesitated. The High Forge priestess turned on them, silver robes snapping around her ankles. Remove her hand from the anvil. One guard seized Seris's wrist. The forge hammer rose by itself. The entire hall heard the warning in the metal. The guard let go. Seris could barely breathe. I did not do this. Malvara's eyes flashed. No one accused you of understanding what you carry. That is not an answer, Kaelor said. His voice cut through the noise like a blade laid flat against a throat. Malvara bowed her head, but only enough to seem obedient. Your Majesty, the forge has reacted to corruption, not inheritance. The throne wrote her name. The throne is broken. That is why this test was necessary. Kaelor descended one step from the dais. The golden letters behind him pulsed, and as they did, the carved dragon wings on the throne shuddered. For a heartbeat, Seris thought they might open. They did not. Instead, the forge hammer struck again. A third line burned beneath the first two. Not curse. The court recoiled. Seris's throat tightened so hard she almost made a sound. Not curse. 2 words. Small beside the vast throne. Small beside the court's cruelty. But they struck deeper than any defense she had ever spoken for herself. Kaelor's gaze shifted to her marked palm. The black hammer flame-crowned symbol glowed faintly beneath the forge heat, no longer looking like a burn. It looked like something sealed. Who marked you? He asked. The question was too direct, too close. Seris pulled against the anvil, but her hand would not lift. I was born with it. A murmure rose. Born marks were dangerous. Born marks meant bloodline, not accident. Bloodline meant old claims, old crimes, old laws hidden under ash. Malvara stepped toward the forge. Enough. If the throne names her, then the throne is compromised. The woman must be isolated before the bond spreads. Kaelor looked at her. You are very eager to separate her from the only royal fire that has answered in 20 years. The court stilled again. Seris felt the words move through her like dangerous warmth. He was not protecting her. Not exactly. He was testing the room, listening for the lie beneath the ritual. But even that was more than anyone had done for her. Malvara's expression remained composed. I am eager to preserve your reign. My reign, Kaelor said, has been preserved into silence. The molten letters flared. The throne groaned. Seris felt the sound inside her palm, as if the anvil and throne were two ends of the same buried chain. Then the forge showed her something. Not a vision. Not fully. A flash of black stone. A throne split with red light. A man's hand, Kaelor's hand, pressed to the royal seat while priests chanted his name. The throne remained cold. Malvara stood behind him, younger by only a few years, whispering, Again, Majesty, the forge must hear you. The image vanished. Seris gasped. Kaelor saw. What did you see? Malvara answered before Seris could. Shell shock. Ash, cursed minds break easily under royal iron. Kaelor did not look away from Seris. I asked her. A strange silence followed. No one had asked Seris anything in the throne hall except where to stand, what to carry, when to kneel. She swallowed. I saw you touching the throne. Kaelor went still. You were younger, she said. The priestess told you to try again. Something dark passed over his face. Malvara's voice lowered. Your Majesty, this is exactly how forbidden marks seduce power. They show grief. They imitate wounds. Seris flinched at the word seduce. The court heard it too, and the accusation shifted shape around her. Not only cursed now, temptation, contamination. A woman whose body could mislead a king. Kaelor's jaw tightened. For a moment, Seris thought he would step away from her. Instead, he came down from the dais and walked toward the forge. The nobles parted with fear. He stopped opposite her, the black anvil between them. Close enough for Seris to see faint cracks of emberlight beneath the skin at his throat, pulsing unevenly like a heart that had forgotten its rhythm. You said you carried coal baskets, he said. Yes, and the forge woke for you. I did not ask it to. No, his eyes held hers. That is what troubles her. Malvara's face hardened. The forge hammer trembled above the anvil. Seris's palm burned brighter. From inside, the dead coals came a sound. Not flame. A whisper of metal being shaped far below the earth. Then the ash inside the forge stirred, and a voice, low and broken as struck iron, breathed through the coals. Last daughter. Seris stopped breathing. Kaelor's eyes flared gold. Malvara moved fast. Too fast for a priestess. She snatched a thin black blade from her sleeve and slashed it across Seris's bound wrist. Blood splashed onto the anvil. The forge roared awake. Blue-white fire erupted upward, throwing every guard back. Seris cried out as molten light raced from her blood to the throne, and a new word began to carve itself beneath her name. Not a title, not a sentence. A second name, Kaelor Veyr. The two names burned side by side. Then the forge hammer rose higher than before, and the dead throne finally answered with a dragon's heartbeat. The throne's heartbeat rolled through the hall once. Then again, slow, heavy, alive. Every torch along the black pillars bent toward it. The dragon banners above shivered, as if a storm had entered without opening the doors. Seris stood frozen with blood running down her wrist and her palm still locked to the anvil, while King Kaelor's name burned beside hers across the throne wings. Seris Ashborne, Kaelor Veyr, bond unfinished. The words lit the hall in molten gold. No one laughed now. Malvara's black blade dripped Seris's blood onto the floor. Her face had gone still in the way lakes went still before ice cracked beneath them. Kaelor looked from the blade to Seris's bleeding wrist. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. Priestess, The single word made several nobles step back. Malvara lowered the blade at once, but not in surrender. Your Majesty, the forge needed blood to reveal the corruption. Now we know how deep it runs. Kaelor came around the anvil. The forge fire rose between them, blue-white and wild, but it did not touch him. It bent away from his armor, like a frightened animal that recognized its master and feared what had been done to him. Seris tried to pull her hand free. The anvil held her. Her wrist throbbed where Malvara had cut it. Blood slid over the black mark on her palm, and each drop vanished into the iron, as if the forge were drinking a name it had been denied too long. Kaelor stopped beside her, too close. The heat around him was not like the forge. His was darker, buried deeper, a royal flame forced to burn beneath stone. Seris felt it reach toward her wound, then recoil, as if touching her might break them both. "Release her," he said. The anvil did not obey. The court saw. A faint tremor passed through Kaelor's jaw. He set one gauntleted hand on the edge of the forge. Malvara sharply said, "Majesty, do not." Kaelor looked at her. For the first time, fear crossed her face. Not for him, for what he might wake. He placed his bare hand on the anvil beside Seris's. The forge screamed, not in pain, in recognition. Fire shot upward in a column so bright the nobles covered their eyes. Seris felt Kaelor's flame enter the iron at the same moment hers did. The two did not merge. They struck each other like flint and steel, making the entire throne hall ring. A vision opened inside the fire. Seris saw a chamber beneath the palace, older than the hall above it. A black throne root twisted through stone, cracked down the middle. On one side burned Kaelor's name, incomplete and fading. On the other side was an empty hollow shaped like another name, Hers. Then the vision shifted. A woman stood before the Emberless Forge 20 years ago, her dark hair braided back, her left palm marked with the same hammer flame crown symbol Seris carried. She pressed both hands to the anvil, while priests shouted for guards. Seris knew her face from a single hidden memory. Her mother, Seris Ashborne. The court had called her traitor. The forge called her keeper. Seris made a sound too small for the hall, but Kaelor heard it. "Who is she?" he asked. "My mother." Malvara's voice cut in. "A condemned forge, witch." The vision flared hotter. Elwyn turned inside the fire, not toward Malvara, not toward the guards, but toward the throne. Her voice came through the forge like metal drawn from a wound. "The bond is not broken, it is unfinished." The hall went silent. Kaelor's hand tensed beside Seris's. In the vision, a younger Malvara appeared, standing behind Eloin with a ring of black keys hanging from her wrist. Beside her stood 3 council lords and an old king with Kaelor's eyes. Kaelor's father. Eloin faced them all. "If you bury forge blood, the throne will starve." The old king looked away. Malvara did not. She lifted one black key and pressed it into the side of the anvil. "Then it will starve quietly." The vision shattered. Seris gasped as the anvil finally released her hand. She stumbled, but Kaelor caught her wrist before she fell. His grip was firm, careful, and furious at the blood still running over her skin. She should have pulled away. Every instinct told her to. Kings did not touch cursed women gently. Powerful men did not lower their voices without wanting something. But Kaelor's thumbs stopped just short of the cut, refusing to press pain into an open wound. "Your mother did not betray the throne," he said. Malvara stepped forward. "Your Majesty, grief. Born visions cannot rewrite law." "No," Kaelor said, "but blood can uncover what law buried." He released Seris, only when she steadied herself. The loss of his touch left the air colder. Malvara saw that too. Her eyes sharpened. "My king," she said, soft enough to sound intimate before the court. "You are wounded by old failure. Do not let this woman turn your hunger for a living throne into desire for a dangerous lie." Desire. The word passed through the nobles, like a spark through oil. Seris felt heat rise to her face, part shame, part anger. Malvara had not only accused her of corruption now, she had made her body the danger. Her presence, her nearness, the way the king had touched her wrist. Kaelor's expression hardened. "Careful," he said. Malvara bowed. "Always." The forge hammer rose again. This time, It did not strike the anvil. It turned in the air, slowly. Its black iron head pointed toward the Dragon King's throne. The molten letters on the dragon wings brightened until the whole hall could read them clearly. Then the throne opened one hidden seam beneath the armrest. A thin line of fire crawled across the black gold metal, forming a shape no one had seen in public for 2 decades. A crown split by a hammer. The mark on Seris's palm. Several nobles fell to their knees. One whispered, "Forge, blood." Maelvara spun toward him. Silence. But the word had already entered the hall. Forge blood. Seris felt it land inside her, not as power, but as a door she had been afraid to touch. Kaelor looked at her palm, then at the throne. "My father ordered the forge. Bloodline erased," he said. Maelvara's mouth thinned. "Your father saved this kingdom from being ruled by a second fire." "No," Kaelor said, his voice low. "He left me with half a throne." The forge roared. The throne answered. And beneath both sounds, Seris heard something else. A deep metallic knock from under the dais. Once, twice, like a hammer striking from inside the throne itself. Maelvara's calm cracked fully. "End the rite." No one moved. She turned to the guards. "End it." The guards rushed forward. Kaelor stepped before Seris. His armor caught the forge light, black scales edged in gold. For a heartbeat, he looked less like a king defending his court and more like a dragon standing over a hidden flame. "No one cuts her again," he said. Seris stared at his back. The words should not have reached so deep, but they did. Behind the throne, the carved dragon wings began to spread. Not stone shifting, not decoration. Something alive beneath metal. The molten letters changed again. A 4th line burned under their names. "Bring her below." Then the floor beneath the throne split open. The split beneath the throne opened without dust. That was what frightened Seris most. Stones should have broken. Pillars should have shaken. The throne hall should have cracked like any mortal place torn open from below. Instead, the black floor parted with the obedience of something long trained to hide. A stairway waited beneath the Dragon King's throne. Narrow, steep, lit by a red glow that did not flicker. No noble breathed. The carved dragon wings behind the throne had spread halfway, revealing old mechanisms of black gold bone and forge iron. The molten words still burned across them. "Bring her below." Seris stood behind Kaelor with blood drying on her wrist and the mark on her palm still pulsing. Every instinct told her to run from the stairs. Nothing buried under a throne for 20 years wanted kindness from a cursed woman dragged in chains. Maelvara moved first. She stepped between the throne and the open stair. "Your Majesty, the lower forge is forbidden." Kaelor did not look at her. "To whom?" "To all living blood." "Convenient." Her jaw tightened. The forge below was sealed after the Ashborne treason. Whatever remains down there answers corruption. The hammer above the Emberless Forge swung once in the air. Not striking. Warning. Kaelor looked at Seris. "Did your mother ever speak of a lower forge?" Seris shook her head. "My mother barely spoke of anything before the mark." But memory stirred. A lullaby hummed under breath. Her mother washing ash from Seris's fingers, a whisper against her hair. "If the floor ever opens, do not follow a voice that calls you cursed. Follow the one that knows your name." Seris swallowed. "The forge wrote my name," she said. "Not yours alone." Kaelor's eyes held hers. There it was again, that dangerous attention. Not trust, not tenderness. Something more unsettling. A king who had learned the court was lying and had begun to measure the shape of truth by looking at her. Maelvara saw it and struck. "Majesty," she said softly, "if you take her below, the court will say the throne has claimed a cursed woman before a queen." The accusation moved through the hall with poisoned elegance. Seris felt it hit every listening ear. A woman like her did not need to commit treason. Standing too near a king was enough. Being looked at too long was enough. A mark on her skin, blood on his hand, her name beside his on the throne. Maelvara would turn all of it into hunger and shame if allowed. Kaelor's voice cooled. "The court has said enough tonight." Then he turned to the guards. "Remove her chains." The hall gasped. Seris looked at him sharply. "No." The word escaped before she could bury it. "Kaelor pause." Seris lifted her cuffed wrists. "If you free me now, They will say I bewitched you. A faint shadow crossed his face. And if I leave you bound, they will see I walked below because the throne called me, not because you favored me. For a breath, he only stared. Then something, almost like respect, moved through his eyes. Very well. He drew a black dagger from his belt and cut only the chain between her wrists, leaving the cuffs around each hand. Enough freedom to move, enough iron for the court to see she had not been released into privilege. Malvara's gaze sharpened with hatred. Kaelor stepped toward the stair. Seris followed. The first step burned cold beneath her bare feet. Behind them, Malvara spoke. If she opens what your father sealed, Majesty, the houses will not call it mercy. They will call it betrayal. Kaelor glanced back once. Then let them choose whether they prefer truth or rot. He descended. Seris followed him into the red dark. The stair closed behind them halfway, not fully. A slit of throne hall light remained above, enough for the court to witness, not enough for them to interfere. Below, the air changed. It smelled of old iron, buried smoke, and rain on stone. The walls were carved with names, thousands of them, but most had been hammered flat until only scars remained. Seris trailed one cuffed hand near the marks and felt a tremor answer from beneath the rock. Forgotten names. Not dead. Flattened. Kaelor walked ahead with one hand near his sword, though Seris could see the uneven pulse of emberlight at his throat. Each step toward the lower forge seemed to hurt him. You should go back, she said. He did not turn. That would please many people. That is not what I meant. I know. The answer was quiet enough to unsettle her. At the bottom of the stair waited a circular chamber blackened from floor to ceiling. In its center stood a second forge, larger than the one above, its mouth sealed by 7 bands of iron. Behind it rose the roots of the Dragon King's throne, descending through the palace like the ribs of a buried beast. One root was broken. The break was clean, deliberate, and hollow inside. Kaelor stopped. Seris knew, without knowing how, that the hollow was where her name had belonged. The lower forge exhaled. A voice came from within the sealed iron bands. Not her mother's, not the throne's. A deep, metallic voice, ancient and weary. Unfinished king. Kaelor's face hardened. Then the voice turned. Unhammered daughter. Seris's mark flared. The 7 bands around the forge glowed red. Above them, footsteps sounded as Maelvara and the court gathered around the open stair, listening from the throne hall. The lower forge spoke again. One bond was broken by fear. One name was buried by blood. Bring palm and crown, or let the throne die. Seris looked at Kaelor. He looked back, and for the first time, the king's control did not hide the truth quickly enough. He was afraid, not of the forge, of needing her. Before either could speak, Maelvara's voice rang down from above. Do not touch it together. Too late. The broken throne root reached from the wall like a blackened hand and wrapped around Seris's cuff. Then another root seized Kaelor's wrist. The lower forge ignited between them. And in the fire, Seris saw the night her mother was condemned. The fire did not show Seris a memory gently. It threw her into it. One heartbeat, she stood in the lower forge with Kaelor across from her, black roots gripping both their wrists. The next, the chamber around her blazed with the shape of another night. 20 years ago. The same lower forge burned hotter then, white at its heart and red around the edges. The 7 iron bands had not yet sealed its mouth. The throne roots behind it pulsed with living fire, each one carrying a name from crown to stone. At the center of the chamber stood Ashborne, Seris's mother. Not bowed, not begging, not the broken woman Seris remembered scrubbing ash from her daughter's hands in a room too cold for winter. Elowen stood with her marked palm pressed to the forge, her dark hair loose around her face, her dress scorched at the hem. The hammer flame crown mark on her skin burned bright enough to light every scarred name on the wall. Before her stood the old Dragon King, Kaelor's father, with fear hidden under royal anger. Beside him waited Malvara Sorn, younger, beautiful, and terribly calm. The throne has chosen wrongly, the old king said. Elowen's voice was steady. The throne does not choose servants, it completes bonds. The crown cannot share its fire with forge blood. The crown already has, Elowen said. You only hate the shape of the truth. The memory turned. Seris saw a boy near the chamber arch. Kaelor, no more than 12, dressed in black ceremonial robes too heavy for his thin shoulders. His amber eyes were fixed on Elowen's hand, not with hatred, but with wonder. Behind him, the upper throne cast no shadow, as if waiting for something still unnamed. The old king did not see his son watching. Maelvara did. Seris felt Kaelor stiffen across the real fire. He was seeing it too. In the memory, Maelvara stepped forward with the ring of black keys at her wrist. Forge. Blood was created to serve the throne, not stand beside it. Elowen looked at her. No. Forge. Blood was born when the first Dragon King could not survive his own fire. We were not servants to the throne. We were the hands that finished what royal blood began. Murmurs echoed from unseen witnesses. The old king's face tightened. Enough. But Elowen turned toward the boy at the arch. Toward Kaelor. He will die with an unfinished bond, she said. Not quickly, not by blade. The throne will starve him slowly because half its answer has been buried. Young Kaelor took one step forward. Maelvara moved first. She struck Elowen across the mouth with the black key. The forge roared. In the present, Seris felt the same roar shake through her bones. The root around her cuff tightened until iron bit skin. Kaelor pulled against his own binding. Stop this. The lower forge ignored him. The memory continued. Elowen touched her bleeding lip, then pressed that blood to the anvil. Letters flared across the throne root. Ashborne. Not Seris's name. Her mother's. Then beneath it, another word tried to form. Consort. The old king lunged forward. Erase it. Maelvara's keys entered the forge. On it be one. 7 locks. 7 bands. Each black key turned with the sound of a name being crushed flat. Elowen screamed when the first band wrapped around the forge's mouth. Not from fear, from the bond being cut before it could complete. The throne roots behind her convulsed, and the name on the wall broke apart into sparks. Young Kaelor shouted, but guards dragged him back. Seris's chest hurt. Not because the memory belonged to her, because Kaelor had been there, because he had seen the first burial and been told all his life it was justice. The old king's voice shook as he gave the order. Let the Ashborne line end in ash. Maelvara turned toward the boy. For your sake, Majesty, to come. Young Kaelor fought the guards until one struck him behind the ear. The memory cracked. When it reformed, Elowen was on her knees. Her mark had dimmed, but not died. Maelvara crouched before her with one final black key. Where is the child? Maelvara asked. Elowen smiled through blood. Seris stopped breathing. You will not find her by curse, Elowen whispered. I gave her a dead mark. Maelvara's calm vanished. What did you do? I made her look like shame. The words struck Seris so hard she nearly fell. Her curse, her lifetime of mockery, her hidden palm. Her mother had not left her marked to suffer. She had hidden her in the only disguise cruel enough that the court would never look closely. Maelvara drove the final key into the forge. The memory shattered. Seris returned to the lower chamber with a gasp. The roots still held her and Kaelor on opposite sides of the burning forge. Above them, the court watched through the open stair in frightened silence. Maelvara stood at the top, one hand clenched around the black keys at her belt. Kaelor's face had gone pale beneath the forge light. He looked at Seris as if the past had placed a blade between them and dared him to move first. I was told your mother tried to steal my throne, he said. Seris swallowed the ache in her throat. I was told she died proving she had no fire. Both were lies. His voice was rough. Not apology. Not yet. Something more difficult from a king. Admission. The lower forge spoke again. Palm and crown, blood and name, complete or perish. The root around Seris's wrist dragged her closer to the forge. Kaelor's root pulled him, too. Maelvara's voice fell from above, sharp with panic. Your Majesty, if you complete that bond, the throne will answer her as well as you. Kaelor looked up. And that is what you feared? What I feared, Maelvara said, was a king ruled by a woman whose blood can command royal fire. Seris laughed once, bitter and soft. Every eye turned to her. I have commanded nothing in this hall, she said. Not the guards, not the forge, not the throne, not even the chain on my wrists. Her gaze lifted to Kaelor. But everyone here is terrified that I might be asked instead of used. The lower forge flared. Kaelor's eyes did not leave her. Then slowly, in front of the watching court, he turned his bound wrist until his palm faced the fire. Not surrender. Invitation. What does the forge require? He asked. The ancient voice answered from the flame. Her true name, your open crown, one hammer stroke freely given. Seris looked at the hanging hammer above the forge. It began to move. Not toward Kaelor. Toward her. The hammer moved like a moon torn loose from the dark. Slowly, silently, its black iron head turned away from the Dragon King and lowered toward Seris, as if the lower forge had mistaken a cursed woman in iron cuffs for the hand of judgment. Above the stair, the court stirred in fear. She cannot hold it, someone whispered. Forge. Blood, another breathed, as if the word itself might stain the tongue. Seris stared at the descending hammer and felt the old shape of her life closing around her. All those years of being told her hands ruined what they touched. All those years of hiding her palm beneath ash silk while others decided what her mark meant. Now the ancient forge itself wanted those same hands. She should have felt powerful. She felt sick. Kaelor saw it. Seris. Her name and his voice steadied the chamber more than the fire did. She looked across the forge at him. The throne root still gripped his wrist, pulling his palm toward the flame. Emberlight moved under his skin in broken pulses. He was a king held by his own crown, but he did not look at the hammer with hunger. He looked at her. If this is not your will, he said, I will break the root. Malvera laughed sharply from above. You cannot break throne root, Majesty. Kaelor's eyes did not leave Seris. I did not ask her. The lower forge quieted. Even the hammer paused. Seris's throat tightened. Since childhood, every powerful person had treated her as a thing to prove, hide, accuse, or use. Her mother had made her curse mark look like shame, so the court would overlook her. Malvara had dragged her to the forge to expose her. The throne had written her name before she understood why. But Kaelor had asked, not the forge, not the court. Here, that should not have mattered so much. It did. Seris looked at the black hammer. What happens if I refuse? The ancient voice inside the forge answered. Then the bond remains unfinished. The throne continues to starve. The king burns hollow. The buried names stay flattened. And if I accept, one stroke opens what fear sealed. That is not an answer. The forge gave no comfort. Kaelor's mouth tightened, as if he recognized the cruelty of ancient powers that spoke in riddles, while living flesh paid the cost. Malvara descended 3 steps before guards could stop her. If she accepts, she becomes half the throne's answer. Every royal fire will hear her. Every enemy house will call her usurper. Every lord who already fears your weakness will say the Dragon King bowed to ash blood. Seris looked up. You mean they will say what you tell them to say? Malvara's eyes flashed. Good. For once, Seris wanted the woman angry. Calm lies were harder to strike. The hammer lowered another inch. The throne root around Seris's cuff tightened, drawing blood where iron met skin. Kaelor pulled against his own binding and pain crossed his face, fast but unmistakable. The forge needed both of them. That was the danger. Not romance, not desire, not whatever poison Malvara tried to make of the way the king had looked at her. Need. A kingdom could forgive a king for wanting a woman. It would fear him for needing one. Seris lifted her cuffed hand toward the hammer. Kaelor's voice darkened. Wait. She stopped. He turned his palm fully toward the fire. If there is a price, it comes through me first. No, Seris said. It is my throne. And my name. The answer left her before fear could soften it. The forge flared. Kaelor stared at her, and something in his guarded face shifted. Not surrender. Not affection. Respect. Sharpened by pain. Then we ask the forge for the price before either of us pays it, he said. Seris almost smiled. Almost. Together, they looked into the fire. What is the price? She asked. The lower forge answered with 3 hammer beats from somewhere beneath the stone. Truth from the daughter, blood from the king, choice from both. Malvara's face changed. Not fear this time. Calculation. Seris saw it too late. The priestess drew one of the black keys from her belt and thrust it toward the open stair. The key's teeth split apart into thin, hooked prongs, and the 7 iron bands sealing the forge screamed in answer. "The daughter's truth," Malvara said, voice ringing down into the chamber, "is that her bloodline was condemned for binding kings." The forge fire flickered. The watching court murmured. Malvara pressed harder. "The king's blood is already weakened. His choice is already compromised. This is not completion. It is seduction, dressed as law." Seris flinched. Not because she believed it, because some part of the court wanted to. Kaelor's voice came low. "You will not put filth on her name to clean your crime." "My crime?" Malvara's smile was thin and wounded, almost believable. "I have spent 20 years holding a starving throne together while nobles circled you like carrion birds. Your father feared forge, blood, because it made kings dependent. I feared it because dependency becomes devotion, and devotion makes rulers reckless." For the first time, Seris heard the human shape inside the lie. Maelvara did not only want power, she feared losing control of a kingdom she thought only restraint could save. That made her more dangerous, not less. The black key twisted in her hand. The forge bands tightened. The root around Kaelor's wrist dragged him forward until his palm entered the edge of the flame. He inhaled sharply but did not cry out. Blood opened across his skin, not cut by blade, but drawn by the forge itself. Blood from the king. Seris reached toward him. The hammer dropped into her other hand. It should have crushed her. Instead, it fit. The weight was immense, but not physical. She felt the flattened names in the walls, the erased forge blood, her mother's voice, Kaelor's unfinished bond, and every buried fire waiting for the stroke that would either free them or break her. Truth from the daughter. Seris closed her fingers around the handle. "My truth," she said, her voice shaking, "is that I was taught to hate my own hand before I knew what it could hold." The forge brightened. She looked up at the court above. "My mother did not raise me to bind a king. She hid me so I would survive men and women who feared being answered no." The hammer warmed. Maelvara's key cracked. Kaelor's blood fell into the forge. The fire turned gold. Choice from both. Kaelor met Seris's eyes across the blaze. "I choose truth over a throne that survives by starving," he said. Every noble heard him. Seris lifted the hammer. "I choose my name," she whispered. Then she struck the anvil. The lower forge exploded open, and the first name it released was not Seris Ashborne. It was the name the court had stolen from her mother. The name rose from the forge like a body pulled out of flame. Elowen Ashborne, not carved in accusation, not whispered as treason, forged in gold. The letters burned across the lower chamber walls, filling every hammered flat scar with light. Seris felt the hammer tremble in her hand, as if it had waited 20 years to speak that name without shame. Above the stair, the court fell silent. Even Maelvara did not move. For the first time since Seris had been dragged into the throne hall, the priestess looked less like law and more like a woman standing before a door she had prayed would never open. The lower forge spoke. Name, stolen, bond, severed, keeper, betrayed. The 7 iron bands around its mouth broke one by one. With each snap, a memory flared. Elowen Ashborne kneeling before the old king, refusing to let the throne root die. Elowen hiding a newborn child's marked palm beneath ash silk. Elowen bleeding onto the forge, while Malvara turned black keys into the royal fire. Elowen's last look toward the stair, not afraid for herself, but for the daughter who would grow up believing her own hand was a curse. Seris's grip loosened around the hammer. If Kaelor had not spoken her name, she might have dropped it. "Seris." She looked across the fire. The throne root still held his wrist. Blood ran down his palm into the forge, but his gaze remained on her, steady through pain. "Breathe," he said. A bitter laugh almost broke out of her. The chamber was burning open. Her mother's name was blazing on walls that had tried to erase it. The entire court watched from above, ready to turn grief into fear. And the Dragon King was telling her to breathe, like it was an order he could make the world obey. But she did breathe. Once. The hammer steadied. Maelvara found her voice. "A name in fire proves nothing. The forge is ancient. It answers blood, not truth." The lower forge flared so violently the stair rail turned red. Kaelor's eyes lifted toward her. "You should choose your next lie carefully." Maelvara descended another step. black keys ringing at her side. "I lied to keep your throne alive." "No," Seris said. The word surprised even her. Every gaze shifted down. Seris looked at the priestess through the forge fire. Her voice shook, but the hammer in her hand did not. "You kept the throne hungry." Melvara's mouth tightened. Seris turned toward the walls, where her mother's name still burned. The flattened scars around it were no longer blank. More letters began to rise beneath the gold, faint at first, then brighter. Names. Dozens. Forge blood keepers, Ashborne cousins, children marked and hidden. Men and women whose hands had once finished the fire royal blood could awaken, but not sustain. The court had called them dangerous because it was easier than admitting the throne had never belonged to one bloodline alone. Kaelor saw the names. Something in his face went cold and wounded at once. "My father knew," he said. The forge answered with a low metallic beat. "Once. Truth." Maelvara lifted her chin. "Your father knew what every wise ruler must know. A king who requires another bloodline to complete his throne is vulnerable. A king vulnerable to a woman with fire in her palm becomes a kingdom vulnerable to her grief." Seris felt the accusation strike the court exactly where Maelvara aimed it. Fear of her. Fear of what she could ask for. Fear that the cursed woman might become necessary. Kaelor's root tightened, dragging his bleeding hand deeper into the flame. He hissed through his teeth. The throne above answered with a sound like wings scraping stone. Seris stepped forward. The root around her cuff pulled too, bringing her closer to him until the forge burned between them like a living vow neither had chosen, yet both had awakened. Maelvara raised a black key. "Do you see? The bond is already taking judgment from him. She moves, and he suffers. She speaks, and the throne answers. This is not partnership, it is possession." Seris froze. Possession. That word could ruin everything. Kaelor looked at her then. Not at Maelvara, not at the court. "If the forge binds me against my will," he said, voice carrying upward, "then I will break it." The lower fire quieted. Maelvara's eyes narrowed. Kaelor continued. "If it binds her against hers, I will burn the throne before I let it use her." The court gasped. Seris stared at him. No king of Veyrath had ever spoken of burning the throne, not even in rage, not even in war. The throne was the crown's body, the palace's heart, the symbol that made noble houses kneel instead of tear each other apart. And Kaelor had offered to destroy it before letting Seris become another tool. The hammer in her hand grew warm, not heavy now. Ready. The lower forge spoke. Choice witnessed. Maelvara's face changed. She had expected hunger, denial, political weakness. She had not expected the Dragon King to choose against his own power. So she used the last weapon left. She turned to the court above. If he completes the bond, she becomes Forge, consort in all but crown. Her name will stand inside the throne root. Her blood will hear every royal fire. If she turns against him, Veyrath burns from within. Several nobles recoiled. Council Lord Erevan stepped to the stair. "Majesty, the priestess speaks true. This cannot be decided in a hidden chamber with a cursed woman holding royal iron." Kaelor's eyes became dangerous. "She is not cursed." Erevan's gaze flicked to Seris. "Then let the forge prove it before the full court." Maelvara went still. Too still. Seris understood a breath later. That was what Maelvara wanted now. If the bond completed below, truth belonged to the forge. If it was forced above, before frightened nobles and armed guards, one mistake could turn Seris into a public threat. One flare, one wound, one scream. They would call it proof. Kaelor understood too. "No," he said. But the lower forge answered before anyone else could. Name buried in public, name restored in public. The throne root released Kaelor's wrist. Then Seris. The stair opened fully. Above, the throne hall waited in gold and shadow. Seris looked at the hammer in her hand. Kaelor stepped beside her, blood still running from his palm. "You do not have to walk up there," he said quietly. Seris looked at the names burning on the walls. Her mother's first, then all the others. "Yes," she said, "I do." Together, they climbed from the lower forge into the watching court. And as Seris crossed the final step, the Dragon King's throne turned molten behind Maelvara. shaping one last command across its wings. Strike the crown. The words burned across the throne wings, like a sentence passed by fire. Strike the crown. Every noble in the hall saw them. Every guard. Every priest. Every lord who had ever bowed to Kaelor Veyr, while whispering that his throne was dying because his blood was not strong enough. Seris stood at the top of the stair with the forge hammer in her hand, iron cuffs still locked around her wrists, her cut palm glowing through blood. Behind her, Kaelor rose from the lower forge with royal blood running down his fingers and gold fire flickering unevenly at his throat. Malvara stood before the throne. For the first time, she looked trapped. Not by chains, by the very symbol she had spent 20 years controlling. Council Lord Erevan stepped away from the stair, face pale. "Majesty, do not allow this. The crown is sacred." Kaelor's gaze did not leave the molten words. The crown just gave its command. "The throne is compromised." Seris laughed once, softly. It was not amusement. It was exhaustion, sharpened into sound. "That is what you all say when it finally speaks without you." The hall turned toward her. A year ago, even a day ago, Seris would have swallowed those words until they became another stone inside her chest. Cursed women did not answer councils. Coal carriers did not accuse nobles. Ash-marked girls did not stand beside kings with royal hammers in their hands. But her mother's name still burned below. And now the throne had asked her to strike the crown. Malvara lifted one hand. "Seris, listen carefully. If you strike royal iron without full coronation, the backlash may kill you." Kaelor moved at once. Enough. But Seris heard what hid beneath the warning. Not concern. Knowledge. "You have seen this done," Seris said. Malvara's eyes narrowed. The forge hammer warmed in Seris's grip. A thin line of fire traveled from the throne to the floor, then across the black stone toward Seris's feet. It did not burn a path. It drew one. A circle. A hammer. A crown split down the middle. The same mark as her palm. The court began to murmur. Kaelor stepped close enough that his shoulder nearly touched hers. "What is it showing you?" Seris looked at the symbol beneath her feet. "A place to stand." "And the price?" She swallowed. "It is not said." His jaw tightened. "Then we do not proceed." Malvara seized the moment. "You see? Even he knows this is madness. A true forge. Blood would understand the right. She is a broken remnant, half hidden by a dead mother's trick." Seris flinched. Only slightly, but Kaelor saw. The fire in his eyes sharpened. "Speak to her like that again, and priestess or not, I will remove you from this hall." A dangerous hush followed. Seris looked at him, startled by the force of it. Not because she needed him to defend her, because the defense cost him. Each public word drew the court's suspicion tighter around his throat. Every step toward her made Malvara's accusation look easier to believe. Yet he did not retreat. That frightened Seris more than hatred would have. The throne beat once behind them. The molten letters changed. Not crown of gold, crown of fear. The nobles recoiled as if struck. Malvara's face drained of color. The black gold crown resting above the throne, carved into the dragon's headpiece, began to glow. Not with Kaelor's fire, not with Seris's, with a dull, sick red that looked like rust in blood. Kaelor stared at it. His voice dropped. "What did you put in my crown?" Malvara did not answer. The forge answered for her. The hammer pulled Seris's arm upward. She resisted, teeth clenched, and the hall saw the truth of it. She was not commanding the forge. She was holding against it, trying not to become a weapon in another ancient hand. Kaelor reached for the hammer. Seris caught his wrist with her free hand. "No. If it is too heavy." "It is not heavy." Her voice shook. "It is angry." The words silenced him. The crown above the throne split with a thin crack. From within it spilled a whispering smoke, dark red and threaded with black sparks. Faces moved inside the smoke. Not spirits. Memories. Kneeling lords. Malvara turning keys. The old king pressing his seal into molten wax. A boy Kaelor standing before the throne, while the crown's shadow was lowered over him like a cage. Seris saw it. So did the court. The crown had never merely crowned him. It had restrained him. The old king had feared the forge blood bond so deeply that Malvara had forged a fear crown into the throne itself, a hidden restraint designed to keep every future Dragon King dependent on priest and council. Kaelor's face hardened into something almost unbearable. They did not only starve the throne, Seris whispered, they taught it to fear you. His hand curled slowly at his side. For one moment, Seris thought rage would take him. Instead, he closed his eyes, breathed once, then opened them and looked at her. Strike it. The court gasped. Malvara shouted, No! Seris looked at him. If I break it wrong, you will not. You do not know that. No, Kaelor said. I choose to trust it. The forge? His gaze held hers. You. The word entered her like flame finding dry wood. Not soft, not sweet, terrifying. Because trust from a king before a watching court was not a compliment. It was a declaration with enemies attached. The hammer steadied in Seris's hand. She stepped into the glowing mark on the floor. Malvara rushed forward, black keys flashing between her fingers. Then let the court see what happens when ash blood reaches above its place. She hurled the keys at Seris. Kaelor moved to shield her, but the throne fire surged first. The keys froze in the air. Each one turned molten. The forge hammer rose over Seris's shoulder. Her mark burned open. Not like a curse, like an eye. Seris struck the crown. The sound did not ring. It roared. The black gold dragon throne split with red gold light from base to wing. The hidden fear crown cracked apart, and from inside it burst hundreds of flattened names, rising in fire around the hall. The court fell to its knees. Malvara screamed as the molten keys turned back toward her, each one carrying a name she had locked away. But Seris saw only the throne. Molten letters were carving across it again. Not her name alone now. Not Kaelor's alone. A final line burned beneath both. Bond, accepted by choice. Then the dragon wings behind the throne opened fully. The dragon wings opened with the sound of a kingdom remembering how to breathe. They were not carved stone anymore. They were black gold fire, vast and living, stretching from the throne to the vaulted ceiling until every banner above the hall burned bright along its embroidered edges. The throne did not collapse beneath the force. It straightened, as if some ancient spine inside it had finally been set back into place. Seris stood before it with the forge hammer in both hands. Her wrists shook, not from weakness alone, from the weight of every name released around her. The flattened names spun through the hall like sparks caught in a storm. Seris Ashborne, Marith Forgehand, Sarah of the Lower Coals, Avon Blackpalm, children, keepers, women who had died unnamed, men whose hands had finished King's fire and were thanked with erasure. Their letters flashed across the pillars, the walls, the nobles' robes, the polished black floor. The court could not look away. Neither could Malvara. The molten keys she had thrown at Seris hovered around the priestess now, each one transformed into a blade of burning script. They did not cut her. They circled her, waiting. Kaelor stepped beside Seris, blood still drying across his palm. The fire at his throat no longer flickered unevenly. It burned steady now, deep gold under his skin, but his face remained pale from the cost of it. He looked at the opened throne wings. Then at Seris. You did it, he said. Seris's fingers tightened around the hammer. No. His gaze sharpened. She swallowed, looking at the names blazing over the hall. They did. I only struck where they pointed. Something like approval moved through his eyes, quiet and dangerous. The throne answered with a single golden pulse. Malvara laughed. It was not a sane sound. You think names make a kingdom? She asked. Names do not hold borders. Names do not keep dragon houses from slaughtering one another. Names do not stop ambitious bloodlines from tearing crowns apart. She lifted her chin, and even surrounded by the fire of her own crimes, she found dignity enough to weaponize. I did what frightened rulers refused to do. Kaelor turned toward her. You made fear into law. I made survival into structure. You buried living blood. I buried dangerous claims. Seris took one step forward. The hammer dragged slightly in her grip, heavy again now that the stroke was done. Malvara's eyes fixed on it. Careful, Forge, blood daughter. That hammer has ended lines stronger than yours. Seris stopped. A year ago, the threat would have lowered her head. A day ago, perhaps even an hour ago, it might have made her hide her marked palm beneath torn cloth. Now she looked at the woman who had turned her mother into a traitor and her birthmark into shame. "I do not want your ending," Seris said. "I want the truth finished." The forge beneath the hall answered. One hammer beat rose from below. Finished. The burning keys around Maelvara turned inward. For the first time, her composure failed completely. She looked at Kaelor. "If you let her judge me, you prove everything I warned them about." Kaelor's expression was unreadable. "She is not judging you." Relief flashed across Maelvara's face. "Too soon." "The forge is," he said. The open dragon throne sent one line of fire across the floor. It circled Maelvara's feet, not trapping her by force but marking the place where she stood. The released names gathered around the circle, not screaming, not pleading, witnessing. Maelvara looked down at them, and for a breath, Seris saw the woman beneath the priestess, older than her robes, tired, terrified. Not of death, perhaps, but of being proven wrong after building her life around the belief that control was holiness. Then Maelvara reached for the last black key hidden at her throat. Kaelor moved. Seris moved faster. She did not strike Maelvara. She struck the floor between them. The hammer blow cracked the black stone, and a line of red-gold fire leapt up, knocking the hidden key from Maelvara's hand. It spun through the air and landed before the throne. The key opened by itself. Inside was not metal. It was a name, Kaelor Veyr, but twisted, bound, half erased. Kaelor went still. Seris stared at it, horror spreading through her chest. "She locked part of your name." The court erupted in whispers. Maelvara's mouth tightened. Kaelor's voice was quiet enough to frighten the whole hall. "When?" Maelvara said nothing. The throne answered. A vision rose above the black key. Young Kaelor at his crowning, kneeling before the Emberless Forge, blood on his brow, his father dead only 3 days. Maelvara stood behind him, pressing the key to the base of his crown, while the nobles chanted his name. But the last syllable did not enter the throne. It entered the key. The vision vanished. Seris felt cold despite the fire. No wonder his throne had starved. No wonder his dragonfire had never fully answered. They had not only buried forge blood, they had locked the king away from himself. Kaelor's hand curled slowly. The throne wings flared black at the edges. Several nobles backed away. This was the moment Maelvara had warned them about. The moment a king, whole enough to rage, might become the monster they claimed to have prevented. Seris saw the danger before anyone else. Not from Kaelor. From the court's fear. She set the hammer down. The sound was soft. Kaelor looked at her. Seris walked to the black key and picked it up with her marked hand. It burned into her palm, but she did not let go. "Seris," Kaelor said, warning and worry tangled in one word. She turned to him. "Your name is not mine to return by force." The throne quieted. The court quieted. Even Maelvara looked shaken. Seris held out the key. "If you want it back," she said, "take it because you choose yourself. Not because they stole from you. Not because I command it. Not because the throne hungers." Kaelor stared at the key in her hand. For a breath, he was not the Dragon King. He was the boy in the memory, held back while fire was taken from him. Then he stepped forward. He closed his bloodied fingers over the key, his hand covering hers but not trapping it. The last blackness inside the key broke. Gold fire rushed up his arm, across his throat, into his eyes. The dragon wings behind the throne swept wide, and a shadow shaped like a living dragon rose from the back of the crown, not chained, not starving, not afraid. The court fell to its knees. Kaelor did not look at them. He looked at Seris. "My name is mine," he said. Then, before every noble house in Veyrath, he turned and placed the freed key into her marked palm. "And yours is yours." Maelvara staggered back as if struck. The forge hammer lifted from the floor by itself. It floated between Seris and Kaelor, then turned toward the priestess. The throne spoke in a voice made of iron, dragonfire, and every name released from ash. "False keeper, name the sentence." Seris looked at Kaelor. The court waited for him to command vengeance. But he only said, "No more stolen choices." Then he looked at Seris, and the final decision passed to the woman the court had brought here to prove she was nothing. The hall waited for Seris to become cruel. She could feel it in every kneeling noble, every trembling guard, every priest who had once whispered "Ash cursed" when she passed too near the sacred doors. They expected power to change her shape at once. They expected a curse to reveal itself as vengeance. They expected the woman they had dragged in chains to lift the hammer and answer humiliation with ruin. For one breath, Seris wanted to. Not because she loved pain, because pain remembered. She remembered carrying coal through corridors while ladies pulled their skirts away from her shadow. She remembered children daring one another to touch her covered palm. She remembered sleeping with her marked hand tucked beneath her body, as if shame might leak from it in the dark. She remembered her mother's name spat like ash, her bloodline flattened into warning, her entire life made smaller so frightened rulers could call themselves wise. The forge hammer hovered between her and Maelvara, waiting. The throne's open dragon wings filled the wall behind Kaelor, black gold fire curving high above the court. The freed key still warmed Seris's marked palm. Kaelor stood beside her, not in front of her, not behind. His face was pale from blood loss, and old wounds reopened, but his eyes were clear. No more stolen choices. That was what he had said. So Seris looked at Maelvara and made herself listen deeper than anger. The priestess stood inside the ring of released names, silver robes burned at the hem, black keys shattered around her feet. For the first time, she looked truly afraid. Not of death alone, of meaning nothing. After decades of convincing herself, she alone understood survival. Seris lowered the hammer. A murmur moved through the court. Maelvara's mouth twisted. Mercy? From Forge blood? No, Seris said. Truth. The Forge answered with a low, golden pulse. Seris stepped closer, stopping at the edge of the ring. You made my mother a traitor because you feared what her name would prove. You marked me a curse because you feared I might live long enough to ask why. You locked part of your king's name because you feared a whole ruler would stop needing you. Maelvara's eyes shone with fury. And if I had done nothing? Noble houses would have torn your precious bond apart. They would have used Forge blood daughters as bridal chains and royal weapons. Your mother was not the first woman power tried to swallow. Seris felt the truth in that. Not innocence. Truth. Maelvara had feared something real and turned that fear into a prison. My mother hid me so no one could use me, Seris said. You hunted us so no one could answer you. The released names brightened around the ring. The throne spoke again, quieter now. Sentence. Seris looked at Kaelor. He gave no command, only a slight nod, as if whatever she chose would stand. That trust frightened her more than the hammer had. Seris lifted the freed key and placed it on the black stone floor between Maelvara and the throne. Maelvara Sorn, she said, voice steadying with each word. You will not be burned. You will not be erased. You will not be turned into a warning without a name. Confusion crossed the priestess's face. Seris continued, You will live to restore every name you flattened, every forge, bloodkeeper, every royal fire you locked, every child hidden under shame. Every bond you severed will be written again by your own hand, before the court you taught to fear us. Maelvara went white. Death would have frightened her less. The forge hammer struck the floor once. Judgment accepted. The burning names around the ring flowed downward, wrapping Maelvara's wrists in gold script. Not chains of pain, chains of witness. She gasped as the letters settled into her skin, each one bright enough that no sleeve could hide them. The throne spoke. False keeper bound to memory, office broken, names restored. Maelvara fell to her knees. No one moved to help her. Kaelor turned toward the court. Now the fear sharpened. The nobles had watched their keeper judged. Now they feared the king would turn judgment on them all. Some deserved it. Some knew they did. Seris saw guilt in lowered faces, in clenched hands, in the way certain lords avoided looking at the names still glowing across the pillars. Kaelor raised his bloodied hand. The throne wings folded slightly behind him, not retreating, only listening. Every house that profited from buried forge, blood will bring its records to the throne by moonrise tomorrow, he said. Every sealed name will be restored. Every law written to call a living bond a curse will be struck from the crown of ash. Council Lord Erevan lifted his head carefully. And if the houses refuse? Kaelor's dragonfire darkened, but Seris stepped beside him before rage could become the only answer. Then the forge will remember without their permission, she said. The hammer rose once behind her. That was enough. Erevan bowed until his forehead nearly touched the floor. One by one, the noble houses followed. Seris watched them kneel and felt no triumph, only a strange, aching heaviness. Recognition did not undo years of shame. A throne answering her name did not return childhood mornings when she had wrapped her palm before anyone could see it. Power could not give back her mother, but it could keep them from burying the next daughter. The forge fire softened. A final glow gathered near the anvil above. At first, Seris thought it was another name. Then the light took shape. Seris Ashborne stood in red-gold fire beside the Emberless Forge, no longer bleeding, no longer dragged through memory by accusation. Her face looked younger than Seris remembered, and sadder than any flame should be. Seris forgot the court. Mother, Elowen smiled. My brave Ash, heart. The words broke something in Seris that power had not touched. She took one step forward, but Kaelor's hand gently steadied her elbow when her knees faltered. This time she did not pull away. Elowen looked at him. The Dragon King bowed his head, not as a ruler to a subject, as a man honoring the woman whose bloodline had been made to carry his kingdom's missing half. I was a child when they took your name, Kaelor said. But I am king now. I will restore it. Elowen's flame flickered softly. Then restore hers, without owning it. Kaelor looked at Seris. I will. No oath had ever sounded less ornamental. Elowen's gaze returned to her daughter. The forge was never waiting for a stronger king. It was waiting for the woman whose blood could finish the bond without becoming its prisoner. Seris's tears blurred the gold light. I thought you left me cursed. I left you hidden. Elowen lifted one burning hand toward Seris's marked palm. I am sorry hiding hurt so much. Seris could not answer. Elowen's fire touched her hand. The black mark opened fully, not as a wound, but as a living seal, hammer, flame, and crown no longer split. The same symbol bloomed across the throne beside Kaelor's name, then beside Seris's, not above his, not beneath. Beside. Elowen's flame thinned into sparks. Name yourself, she whispered. Then she was gone. Silence held the hall. Seris looked at the throne. Molten letters waited across the black gold wings, unfinished not because the bond lacked power, but because it required consent. Kaelor extended his hand, not demanding, offering. Before the court, before my Elvara bound in witness script, before the names of the dead and hidden, Seris placed her marked palm in his bloodied one. The throne fire rose. What name do you claim? Kaelor asked. Seris felt the old fear stir one last time. Ash Witch. Curse marked. Forge Rat. Nothing. She let those names burn. Seris Ashborne, she said. Last daughter of Forge. Blood. Keeper of my own fire. The throne accepted. Her name forged into the dragon wings in red gold light, clean and unbroken. Kaelor's name burned beside it, no longer half erased. Between them appeared a final line, bond finished by choice. The Emberless Forge roared to life above and below the throne. Not blue-white violence now, but deep golden flame, steady as a heart that had remembered its rhythm. The dragon wings behind the throne opened fully, and Kaelor's dragon shadow rose through them, vast and radiant, lowering its head, not to command Seris, but to acknowledge her. The court remained kneeling. Kaelor turned to her, his face lit by the fire they had finished together. I will not ask you to be my crown, he said quietly. Seris looked at their joined hands. Good. A faint smile touched his mouth. What would you allow me to ask? The question was dangerous, in a gentler way. Seris looked at the restored names glowing through the hall, at the forge that had once been dead, at the throne that had finally stopped starving. Then she looked at the king, who had chosen to trust her when fear would have been easier. Ask me again, when this kingdom knows how to speak my name without lowering its voice. Kaelor's smile deepened, not possessive, not wounded by refusal. Patient. Then I will teach it quickly. For the first time that night, Seris almost laughed. Dawn broke through the high windows of the throne hall, pale gold over black stone. The ash in the royal forge lifted into the air like 1,000 tiny stars, and the banners overhead brightened as living fire ran through their dragon thread. Seris stood beside the Dragon King, no longer dragged, hidden, or named by fear. The forge had not proven she carried no dragonfire. It had proven the throne had been incomplete without the blood everyone tried to bury. And as the first full flame of the Emberless Forge climbed toward the crown, Seris Ashborne looked at the court that had called her cursed and watched them bow to the name they had failed to erase.